Hey, I'm Alex Rackle from Board Game Co., and this is To Back or Not to Back, the weekly segment, or whatever you want to call it, I guess a segment, where we talk about all the Kickstarters, all the stuff, going through everything that's coming up or just launched, all that stuff. And this week we have a bit of a packed week. We have a packed week every week. October is one of the worst months in terms of your Kickstarter budget in a long time, but we already have in this video, we're going to have a campaign that I was going to back and am not, a campaign that I wanted to back and can't, and a campaign I had no interest in whatsoever and will probably be spending way too much money on now. And let's go ahead and starting off with River and Stone playing cards. And this is going to be as usual. We have timestamps down below. We're going to start with Board Game Adjacent, followed up with Cancelled and Not Funding, and then go into updates, and then finally all the new stuff that launched. And River and Stone playing cards is going to be a set of playing cards by Beth Sobel. Beth Sobel, who has a ton of art from a ton of games you're familiar, from Verdant to half the Pencil First games that come out. She's done a ton of stuff, and she's coming out with a set of playing cards, which is interesting if you want a set of playing cards. For myself, every time I grab a set of playing cards thinking, hey, I'll play Spit or something again, I usually don't, but we do have a few sets around the house all the same. But this is going to be her illustrated set. One of the things in particular that I liked is the nature of the Jack, Queens, and Kings are no longer just, Jack, Queen, and King. Rather, they represent a person through different stages of their life, which is a cute little twist on the concept, while still, of course, giving you the Jack, Queens, and Kings. But either way, that's going to be the River and Stone playing cards. You can get a deck for $15, 2 decks for $28, plus shipping, all of that. As usual, in Board Game Adjacent, I don't really go into the value so much because, I don't imagine you can sell these for what you paid for them, but who knows, because I don't know the market on, well, playing cards. But moving on from there, we have Skinny Minis, and this is the campaign that I had no intention of spending any money on, and the nature of looking at it for these videos, I am probably going to be spending way too much money on them. So let's go ahead and go into it. This is going to be their second Kickstarter, $500,000 raised, 2,500 backers. Their last Kickstarter did $1 million, although granted we have 11 days to go on this. And Skinny Minis represents a new way of, well, having miniatures. Although I'm not sure if you can call them miniatures, they're effectively standees, but Skinny Minis does have a very nice ring to it, so it's great from a marketing standpoint. And can you really argue that it's a mini? What defines a mini? Which is an interesting conversation unto itself. But either way, this is going to be a line of skinny miniatures that come in at roughly, depends on which ones you're buying, depends on the set, depends on the price point, but you can get them for roughly in the range of around 33-35 cents a piece in terms of these, making them cheaper than most miniatures will end up being. Even if you're comparing to a Gigantic Command Kickstarter, which has an amazing price, these are still going to be significantly cheaper than them. Plus, of course, they come full color, which for people who want color, that adds that. For people who want 3D, well, they have some things that do lean a little 3D, but most things are going to be fairly flat. But that said, the appeal of this is going to be the price point. The appeal is going to be the full color. The appeal is going to be the huge variety they have. They have hundreds and hundreds. I think they have, I don't know how many unique sculpts they have. If somebody knows that, I'd love to see. But I believe they have over 1,500 unique sculpts, I think. I'm not certain, but I think. And sculpts is probably the wrong word. Unique artwork. Although I guess they are sculpted. So sculpts. Let's go with sculpts. But either way, and then lastly, the appeal is going to be the storage aspect of it. Like, these things can fit into a binder. They have this little, where do they have it? Well, I'm scrolling through the page at this point. But they have a binder where they show that you can get all this stuff into, well, a few binders are going to hold hundreds and hundreds of your miniatures. So you can travel with these fairly easily. You can store them fairly easily. Your 1,500 miniatures, or, well, Skinny Minis, don't need to take up who knows how much space on your shelf. They can take up a single Calyx cubby if you store them all because of the nature of, well, flatness. Flatness is very easy to store. But that's going to be Skinny Minis. Now, for me, this is the part where I had no interest in backing this at all. I don't generally back these kinds of miniature-only lines. It's just typically not what I go for as much, with the occasional exception. Although in this case, half of the appeal for me is the fact that I can get these for my kids. Literally, I'm looking at this not as a board game thing. I don't play role-playing games. I don't really sub in miniatures and stuff. Maybe there are some games I could see myself using these for. I'm sure I could find some. But for the most part, I'm looking at this as an alternative to Playmobil, to Lego, to things that my kids will enjoy because of the huge savings aspect. My children love playing with both miniatures and standees from games I get. And this could be a line where, like, oh, you can buy hundreds of sets over here. So you can sit there and say, oh, you know what? You've earned a set today. You've earned another set. You've earned a set. They could earn individual miniatures or sets as, like, rewards and prizes. and then store them all in a few binders and set them up on the table whenever they want. So I'm looking at these just primarily as a family thing, which means I'm genuinely looking at spending way too much money for these miniatures because I now want them all. I probably should start a GoFundMe because it's your fault. I was only backing these because I looked into them for the Kickstarter, so it's completely your fault. A good reminder at this point that I do have a Patreon. You're welcome to sign up there because apparently I'm going to need it. But that's going to be Skinny Miniatures. From there, we move on to big news. This is, I think, big news. This is going to be Myth and Goal canceling. Myth and Goal, who 2 days from the finish line, $184,000 raised on a $100,000 goal, canceled yesterday. And this one hit me by surprise. And what I mean by that is usually in the past, and this, by the way, is the campaign that I was totally going to back and now cannot. Myth and Goal hit me by surprise once you see their cancellation. Now, granted, I have not been watching the comments that much. I do know there was a certain amount of dissent and strife in the comments. I don't know what it is about this one, but when we've had other big campaigns cancel, when we've had Into Deep cancel, when we had Bloodstone cancel, when we had larger funded campaigns cancel, generally it does not hit me as a surprise. Generally, I've seen the strife, the reasons, the lack of success that were behind those games, and what could have been done better or different, and usually I'm like, oh yeah, that canceled, that makes sense. And maybe if I had been following the comments more, this would have made more sense to me. But again, I know there was some general dissatisfaction. I haven't been following all the comments. I've been following all the updates. But Myth and Goal canceled, and they basically said they're coming back in one way or another. They are for sure 100% coming back. The part that was interesting is the wording, because they have this over here. They have this, let's go back to the latest update. So, and I was also to give you the updates, the new pledge levels, the standee extras, all those things. And to a certain extent, it does seem like they may have tried to appease too many people without actually appeasing anyone and just adding to their cost, which is not great. In general, people who want standee pledges are usually a very vocal minority. I'm not saying there aren't people who want them. I'm saying the people who are like, no, but I want this and that. I've seen too many times Kickstarter campaigns adjust and pivot their pledge levels to accommodate a small amount of people and then get 10 extra pledges and who knows what in terms of extra incurred costs. So it's always a risk. You never know. Maybe there'll be that one time where you really do make everyone happy, but standee pledges are usually a vocal minority in a miniatures game. But either way, they say, we're not certain when and where or what shape this return will take, but this is a game we absolutely desire to make a reality, so trust us, blah, blah, blah. It may be via crowdfunding or perhaps via other sources. For example, we've received numerous inquiries from retail distribution and localization partners around the globe who wish to bring this title to gamers domestically and internationally, and we're confident we can work with them in order to bring Myth and Goal back in such a way. Basically, they said this may or may not be via crowdfunding, and for example, we have localization partners around the globe. Now, I don't know what their plans are. I don't know what their plans are. But that kind of smacks to me like just laying the groundwork for, hey, by the way, maybe not Kickstarter, maybe just retail, which would be an interesting approach. Not the first time we've seen it, but for Blacklist games for sure, it would be an interesting approach to take, 1,500 backers, $200,000, and then just toss that and say, we're going to run a retail stuff instead. But it may have happened because they may have had retail partners. Any number of things could have happened behind the scenes. I don't know. You could have had maybe Guild Ball or Games Workshop or whatever could have come after them claiming some sort of copyright infringement. I have no idea. It's possible. I don't think so. It could have been that they saw a bunch of retail partners reaching out that they wanted the game, but they didn't want anything Kickstarter exclusive. They wanted the game to be, all the teams available, everything, and that's the only way they're picking it up. Maybe. I don't really know what happened behind the scenes. But the shift and pivot to sounding like there's a decent chance this is coming through retail instead, that is an interesting one. For myself, I'm interested in the game, retail or Kickstarter. This is not actually a game that I feel the need for that much Kickstarter stuff. They have 7 teams currently. They're working towards an 8th team. Here we go. While a team is 8 players, but they're working towards 8 teams. It's possible they had more. I don't know what their plans are. I'd love to see this on my table at some point. I really enjoyed my one play of it. I wish I could have dived in more to it to properly cover it. They didn't have prototypes or anything like that, but overall I really did enjoy my one play, and I do hope this one comes back, even if it does come through retail. I'll grant I'm a bit of a Kickstarter junkie. I like the Kickstarter journey, the extras, the giant all-ins, but I'll still play this game even if it's just 2 teams at retail, although I do really want those miniature end zones because those are pretty cool. Moving on to the not funding category, we have Dungeon Crusade Reprint. Dungeon Crusade is going to be a reprint of, well, Dungeon Crusade. 415 backers, $44,000 raised. I don't think this one's going to be funding based on its current pledge levels, based on its current trajectory. And this is an interesting one because if you look at the ratings on Board Game Geek, the ratings are simultaneously this is a reprint campaign. And the ratings for the original game are simultaneously very high, but if you look at recent reviews, all the recent reviews, which are more relevant, this game only just started delivering, if you look at the more recent reviews of the game, there's a lot of people who are giving this straight up ones because the rulebook is impossible to get through. Note, that's not a critique on the game. I'm not saying the game is bad. I have no idea if the game is bad. I'm saying there seems to be pretty clear, strong evidence that the rulebook is not fun. There are people who are like, I tried, I gave up, I sold it, I'm done, I don't care. I'm not suffering through that much to get to the game. It sounds like it's 72 pages of hard to get through rules, very not well organized, stuff all over the place makes it impossible to reference, and that's worth paying attention to, especially since this upgrade pack doesn't even say anything about a rulebook. This upgrade pack over here does not talk at all about what you're getting as far as rulebook upgrade, which means it doesn't sound like the one thing that I have strong reason to believe is a problem doesn't sound like it's being addressed. And by the way, if you look through this Kickstarter campaign, I'm just going to scroll down here, and I'm just going to take a sip of coffee while I keep scrolling. Just bear with me here. Basically, the point of what I'm doing is I'm just going to keep going. We're nowhere near done yet, just in case you're wondering. And the reason for this is I'm going to show you why I have zero problem believing that the rulebook for this game may have been slightly too long than it should have been compared to what it could have been, just by the nature of me continuing to scroll and scroll and scroll. And to be clear, it's not like we have 700 stretch goals that we unlock that I'm showing you. I'm just scrolling through the basic campaign. There are no stretch goals that are not even funded yet. So we're just going to keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And that's the amount of work they want you to put in to back the game, which I guess honestly is kind of reasonable and fair of them, because that means the people who back the game are likely the people who are slightly more likely to be going through a 72-page rulebook that isn't necessarily the best organized. Now, I'm being a little hard on them, and I'm not. My goal is not to be hard on them, but understand what you're getting into before you back this game. I've had a few people comment that they want me to cover the game. This is a reprint of a game that is currently getting hit a little bit, and they need to figure out some sort of organizational structure in a way of better composing and displaying and showing off the game. It might be the best game. Its ratings from people who like it seem to be pretty up there, but there's a lot to get through, both to back it and then to play it as well. Next up, we have Goldenstar, the Galactic Tournament by Gindie Games. This is one that just does not seem to be taking. It doesn't matter what they do. They've tried Kickstarter, they've tried GameFound, they've tried a complete, relook and visual change to the whole entire game, which I mean, the name, I'll admit, Goldenstar, I don't like the name at all. I like the Final Fusion name better, and I think, honestly, there could be a third name that's better than both of those. But that said, the visuals and the arts, the miniatures were always great from the first campaign. They've really done up the visuals in terms of the card art, the location art, to really make it stand out a lot more. I think the game looks great, but it just isn't taking as far as people finding reasons to back or not back the game. Well, I guess it's taken as far as people finding reasons to not back, but people aren't really jumping in. So this is going to be Goldenstar. It's a bit of a, running around the galaxy trying to compete to get more, to upgrade your faction or whatever it is. You're basically mixing. It's a smash-up kind of approach where you have two different factions that you're mixing together and then dealing with those cards and attacking your enemies and running around the galaxy and, colonizing planets to get upgrades, to get boons, to take actions, all while trying to win the game. It's a fast, punchy game that's just about card play and tableau building and all of that in, well, it depends on the playtime, roughly 30 to 45 minute long experience. That's going to be Goldenstar, the Galactic Tournament, currently not funding, unfortunately. We have Terraternity. We have Terraternity together. We will save Terra. 158 backers, $13,000. This might fund, but if it does, it's going to be close. It's definitely, it should be further along, but it may fund. We'll see how it goes. But this is going to be this is a game themed around trying to be more economic, but trying to be more what's it called? Ecologically, why am I blanking? Environmentally, there we go. Environmentally conscious. And it does so well, in my opinion, in the sense that the game starts off with the premise that as you expand, as you grow, you're inherently going to be doing bad things to the planet. You're adding more coal, you're adding more whatever. You're making the ecosystem worse. But then the goal is to persevere through that to become economically sustainable, environmentally sustainable as you go. So the game doesn't simply take a stance of, this is good, that's bad, plain and simple. it really does push the idea of why you might have environmentally unsustainable things going on, while trying to incentivize the players to grow past that and to become more long-term sustainable and self-sustainable in what they're doing. So I really like that approach to it, which takes a far more realistic approach to the pros and cons, as opposed to just simply saying, oh, you know, this good, that bad. As far as the gameplay does seem to mix Euro mechanics as well as dexterity mechanics. You're going to have this tower you're slowly building, which will eventually just topple and things, which from a theme stance of everyone slowly adding to the tower until it collapses, thematically, that makes sense. Gameplay wise, I don't know if I want, let me take a step back. I know I don't want a dexterity game mixed into my Euro game, so it's a tough sell that in that way. They also are going to have a card game as well as the game itself, so they're going to have the $29 Terraternity card game challenge, as well as $59 pledge level for the game, and $79 for both. But again, it's not funding yet a combination of price point. In general, environmentally friendly themes have never really taken that off that strongly on Kickstarter. Usually, one of the problems you have inherently is people back in the game don't necessarily know if the game is trying to focus more on being environmentally conscious or trying to be a good game. And while they both have their merits, the audience backing the games are generally looking for things that are going to be good games. So it's usually an uphill battle when you try to have an agenda. Whether the agenda is good or bad is not the point, but as soon as you have an agenda on your game and you toss it in, it usually ends up being a little bit more of an uphill battle to try to get that game funded or to do particularly well. Moving on, we have Magical Friends and where to find them. This is one I covered already. $18,000 out of $28,000, 26 days to go. They may fund, the 26 days might help them, but again, even if they do fund, it's going to be a close race over the finish line. This is one that I did enjoy, but I think the price point and then just generally trying to convince people without having a ton of upfront marketing, it is a harder game. This is going to be a game of racing. It's a game where I basically compare it to Small World, if Small World were a game about racing. This is a game where you're going to be picking various friends that have different abilities, think of the races in Small World, and then combining them to try to figure out, well, if I have this character, this character, and this character, then I now have these three abilities, and I'm going to utilize those three abilities to try to move everyone slowly across the finish line. I really enjoyed the racing process, a part of it. I really enjoyed the little combination of trying to figure out which abilities will work, of trying to choose when and how to bid to get the better ability or to not worry because you can get the other three abilities. A fun little challenge. Not a huge fan of the art or the visual appeal of the game personally, but overall I really enjoyed this experience. Lots of fun. Like I said, really did remind me of Small World, and now I'm looking at some of this, it looks like some of the card art is like, I mean, I've seen some of this already, but the card art is just getting better and better. They've been slowly adding color to more and more of the illustrations. But overall, yeah, this is going to be Magical Friends and where to find them. The pledge level is going to be $57, which again, this goes into the category of it does make it hard to convince people. I mean, if you're looking at Small World on the one hand, which is a, you know, well-rated game that's been around for a while, you can buy that for like $40, or you can spend $57 plus shipping to get this one. It's just the nature of having small economies of scale, of having a smaller Kickstarter creator. There's not a lot you can do about that. It just makes it a harder sell as far as the consumer, as far as the backer is concerned. Moving on, we have Threetale. Threetale, not a lot of updates here. Just letting you know, this is a campaign that I particularly enjoy, and I tend to cover campaigns that I particularly enjoyed when they head into that last week. And if usual, if you want coverage of all the campaigns in the last week, check out Room and Board's channel. I'll throw a link down below. But Threetale is going to be a game that I talked about it a lot already. This is currently has 500 backers, $44,000 raised. I think that the 500 people who get this game will be very happy with the game. This is a lot of fun to level up as you go through it, to slowly power up, to run around the board, just building up your stats. I jokingly refer to this game as stat building the game, and I really enjoyed building out the stats of your characters as you run around and try to accomplish all the little side puzzles and treasures and quests and monsters and all these things, and then you head into the end game where hopefully you are powered up enough to take on the scenario objectives that you have, which often involve pretty hard fights that are harder than anything you've done in the game so far. The game currently has five characters in the base game. It has 2 more characters as stretch goals. It has 3 characters in the expansion if you get that, plus the variety of end game prophecies, the scenarios that you're going to be going through that mix up your experience. There's a lot of variability here. I highly recommend it as both a 3-player game and a 1-player game. As a 2-player game, 1 player is going to be controlling 2 characters, and 1 player is going to be controlling 1 character, so you have to be comfortable with that before you dive on into that. That's going to be Threetale. Moving on, we have Drop Drive. This is more of an update. This is going to be basically Drop Drive. Last week, I said Just talking about the value aspect of it. Last week I said, hey, if you look at Dungeon Drop, deluxe copies of Dungeon Drop, we're selling for like $35 on the secondhand market, which means you're going to be taking a small hit on it, which was wrong. This is an update to correct the fact that I was absolutely wrong, because in my head, for some reason, I had it locked in that the deluxe pledge was a $50 pledge, and it wasn't. This is referring to Dungeon Drop, not Drop Drive. But I had in my head that the deluxe pledge was a $50 pledge, and so selling it for $35 means you lost money on it. In reality, the deluxe pledge was around $22, I think it was, or $23, plus shipping, puts it in the range of $30 to $35, which means people who sold it got their money back on it, which is a big difference, a big change. So I wanted to update that. I was completely wrong about that one, just in terms of, like, I had the price point wrong in my head. I may or may not have, I think I looked it up. I don't know what happened. Either way, maybe I was thinking of Drop Drive Deluxe. That might have been it. I might have been thinking of Drop Drive instead of Dungeon Drop. But whatever it was, that's completely inexcusable, so I wanted to, like, update that. And that does, in fact, change the way I would perceive this one as well. If the original deluxe version of the game sold for, well, roughly $35 on a $23 pledge level, plus shipping, then that may well hold true for this one as well. Now, it is true that this one does cost more, so that may factor that in. I would say that walking into this one, expect to get roughly your money back, and or take a small hit, although there are a lot of pledge levels here, going all the way up to $147 for everything, so that can range drastically the higher up you go. It's always harder to find someone who wants everything, but then if you do, then you might be one of the few people who's selling an everything pledge, so it's always a difficult balance there. But I want to update that it definitely is a better back than I implied last week, just given, well, the fact that I was wrong. Moving on, we're going to have Beast. This is going to be another update, and then we'll start moving into, like, newer campaigns, sort of-ish. So, Beast is a game that I've talked about a lot. I really enjoy this game. I gave it a 4 to 5, and my main critiques seem to be being addressed in these stretch goals, and the fact that they've changed the way that hunters won't lose their cards when they die. They've added more hunter abilities, so hunters have more pathways to grow, which may well make this game a 5 to 5 for me. My rating scale is primarily based on the idea that a 5 is a game that I love, and a 4 is a game that I love but has meaningful critiques that detracted from my experience. And in Beast, those were meaningful critiques that detracted from my experience. Every game will have critiques, to be clear. Every game will have things about it that I will complain about or say I would have preferred this, I would have preferred that. The question for me is, did they meaningfully take away from how good the experience could have been? And playing as a hunter in Beast felt less fun than playing as the Beast, and that absolutely was a factor. So it may well end up being a 5 out of 5. I'll have to play it with the new things to change, but overall, this was the best hidden movement game I've played so far. Really enjoy this one. Love the theme, love the artwork, love the everything about this game. Now, one of the big things we talked about last week is the price point and lack of Kickstarter exclusives, and they're seemingly sort of addressing that, although not necessarily in ways that have everyone happy, because they addressed it in terms of giving more optional buys on the table. If you look at the updates over here, we have, nope, not that update. Let's go one more previously. We have over here, this update over here, Kickstarter exclusives, where they announced that they're going to be selling acrylic standees for the game. So you can buy acrylic standees. The pricing is going to be $20 to get acrylic standee for each beast, hunter, and summon in the game. Now that's a Kickstarter exclusive, so it definitely adds to the reasons to get it on Kickstarter if you want the best and everything version of this game, but it wasn't necessarily taken the same way, because people are like, we asked for exclusives and reasons to back, and you gave us an optional buy. Although, bear with me because I'm going to work with you on this one. And then they have sleeves that they didn't announce the pricing on yet, but they're going to be adding Kickstarter exclusive sleeves as well, and then more unique art to the game. So they do seem to be giving some stuff, so they have the more unique art that will potentially be added to the game. I don't know if that's Kickstarter exclusive or not. They're going to have the sleeves that you can buy, and then the standees that you can buy. Now, I completely hear anyone who's like, well, you just gave me an optional purchase and called it a reward, and that's frustrating. It is. But also, if they had a retail pledge and a deluxe pledge, we're all fine with that. We all understand the nature of a retail pledge and a deluxe pledge, so imagine the standees and sleeves had been in a separate pledge called the deluxe pledge that was $20, $30 more. So perceptionally, it was not delivered in the way that I think should have been, but the end result of it is that, yeah, you're being given options here to get the standard version of the game or the Kickstarter exclusive version of the game. Speaking for myself, I don't care at all about the sleeves. I've talked about this before. I generally use Sleeve Kings. The approach they're taking with sleeves is nice. I'm okay with it. I'll happily take them, but I don't know if I'll pay for them. Versus the acrylic standees, I really do like. I think they add a lot. I love, in general, Beast is a game which I don't feel needs miniatures. I feel they did a solid job with the various meeples they had, with the general card art, the world building, but acrylic standees I think do fit right in terms of giving it a deluxe feel to the game and making it feel well, deluxe, which I just said, but overall giving you a better reason to jump into it, although it will cost you more. So I stand mostly by what I said last week. If you're looking for the cheapest entry point and you don't care about those extras, then wait for retail. This game will hit retail. It is a good game. I imagine this game will have a long product life cycle. I imagine people will be talking about this game. One of the fascinating things about the board game space we're in is the number of games that come out every single year, and the number of games we're still talking about 2-3 years down the road. Those are drastically different numbers. I think people will still be talking about Beast in 5 years. I think it is one of the better hidden movement games we've played. It is a solid experience. It plays in 90 minutes, which means it's accessible from playtime stance as well. Everything about this game I think is doing it right, and I think this will be around for a long time, which does mean you can pick it up in retail cheaper, or wait for it to be on sale on Amazon for $37 one day. All those things are possible. But if you want the acrylic standees or the Kickstarter exclusives, or they may add more stuff, I don't know what the plans are, then yes, Kickstarter will be the way to go over there. Then lastly, I know I just said lastly, but I forgot about Voidfall. Lastly, we have Voidfall, although this borders update versus talking about it, because last week I didn't really talk about Voidfall so much as tease talking about Voidfall, and that's because this past week I did a video on Voidfall versus Fractal. For those who want to talk about Fractal or Voidfall, which one is right for you, because they're both 4X games, then yeah, now we talked about it. We talked about it in that video, although I'll talk about it briefly again today. Effectively, Voidfall and Fractal are both 4X experiences coming on Kickstarter right now at the same time. Now, in general, you don't necessarily need either of these games if you have Eclipse, or if you want to get Eclipse. Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy, highly rated game. You should check that one out, see if it's for you or not. Then we have Exodus, I think it's called, which I haven't had the chance to play myself, but in general I've heard Exodus is a faster version of Twilight Imperium, of Eclipse. Obviously it's not the same experience, but hopefully it's a good game as well. I really need to play that one. It's been a long time. I should get it. I should get that game. But then from there as well, you have Twilight Imperium, obviously, in case you want to play Twilight Imperium 4. There's a variety of Space 4X games. We have Warp Gate behind me over there, right over there behind my head, which is another 4X adjacent. I don't know if it's full or 4X. There are a lot of space-themed exploration games out there, because, I mean, space makes for a good 4X setting. But as far as that, whether you want Voidfall or Fractal, if you want neither, that's completely on the table. Both these games are going to run you a pretty penny. I went through this full thing in my comparison video, but Voidfall is leaning more heavily into the Euro genre. It's leaning more heavily into Mind Clash's general bread and butter, which is heavy, thinky, economic-based games, with 4X kind of layered on top of it. 4X is kind of there and present in what you're doing, but if it's going to feel a little less 4X game in its genre, just like, for instance, by the nature of the purely deterministic combat, by the time you walk into combat, you know who won and who lost. It very much feels like an economic game with that little bit of, SpaceX 4X thrown on top of it. And it's fascinating watching I highly recommend looking at comments or opinions around the game, because they have both these games, Voidfall and Fractal, are both available to play online, and people have been playing it online. And Voidfall is a mix of people who are like, another Mind Clash amazing game, this is incredible, you should definitely pick this up, versus people who are like, didn't really feel like the experience I wanted. So I would say if you are back in this game, especially if you're going all in, which means you're going to be spending like $200 plus and everything, then I do recommend checking out those comments, seeing if it's a game for you. I still think it'll hold its value, to be very clear, as far as whether you should back it or not. I think that the full pledge will 100% hold its value. The main core pledge may not, because the main core pledge is going to be more compared to the price point after the fact, which you can get on the website, or you can get it on sale whenever, however. But if you want the deluxe box, all those extras, the ships and whatnot, the upgraded components, all those things will hold their value just fine, as every single Mind Clash Kickstarter that has had deluxe and hard to get things has until now. It's the core pledge that's the only one that's a question whether it's a good back or not, compared to getting it at retail, which again, we have 358 backers, but that's 358 backers compared to 6,200 backers, so people definitely know what's up when it comes to Mind Clash games. But again, check into it heavily if you're getting it. It'll hold its value either way, so if you're on the fence, you can just get it and see if it's for you. It'll almost certainly hold its value. The worst you can compare it to is going to be Cerebria. Cerebria is going to be the closest Mind Clash game that didn't hold its value as much for as long, but even Cerebria, you can still get your money back on it for the most part. It's less of a guarantee compared to Terraternity or Anachrony or whatnot. So overall, the worst I'd compare this to is Cerebria, which is still solid, especially if you play it in the first month or two before everyone's really kind of softened on the game once it arrives. But that's going to be Voidfall, a Euro-based 4X experience. And then from there we have Fractal Beyond the Void, a less Euro-based 4X experience, one that's focusing more on the playtime accessibility. This is approaching more the lane that Exodus took, which is trying to say, hey, you want a short 4X game? Let's try to give you as much of a short 4X game as we can. It won't be short, but it will be short-ish, and this one does seem to come in at roughly 2 hours for 4 players, 30 minutes per player as advertised. 2,000 backers so far, $261,000 raised, 4x experience in, well, roughly 2 hours. The game looks gorgeous. The miniatures, I mean, the visual appeal of both these games, by the way, both taking very different styles, but both managing to look amazing on the table, look very premium, very slick. Overall, Fractal is one that I am very excited about, and it does seem more in my lane, as far as the same reason I'm interested in picking up Exodus, that accessibility aspect of 4X. I like the 4X as a genre, but I need it to be fun to dive into every time. I need it to be accessible in terms of the game length. I need it to play well, to play quickly, which often makes some 4X games, like Twilight Imperium, just not a right fit for me, no matter how amazing they might be. But yeah, Fractal has a lot of things going for it. You can check out, Beastie Geeks has some content, Hungry Gamer has some content. You can check out different content creators as far as these games. Same with Voidfall, tons of content creators there. But overall, you can see if the game is right for you, and or you can play it on TTS if you want to check it out there. They also have miniatures. They have a solo version that is an optional buy if you want to get that. The campaign mode is an optional buy if you want to get that. Honestly, neither of those really appeal to me, so I'm going to have to make decisions as to whether I get that at all. But then if I don't get it, I'm not getting everything. But that's okay. It's okay to not get everything, although I still need to work on that part of myself. But either way, that's going to be Fractal Beyond the Void. This one is less of a certainty as far as holding its value compared to Voidfall, but it's still a pretty good bet. If you look at their original game, their Exodus or something like that, whatever it was called, no, they had Exodus. It was not, when I talked about Exodus a second ago, sorry, while I dodged my head around my camera that's stuck in front of my face, it's Exodus. This is not the same Exodus I was talking about a minute ago, where I was talking about, I think the game I'm thinking of is called Exodus. I could be, no, Extinction? I think the one I'm thinking of is Exodus. The other 4X game that's like space adjacent. Either way, Exodus is a slightly different game from Board Game Inc. that they brought up before. That one held its value just fine, but that overall is why I believe Fractal is likely to hold its value, although not to the same extent that the Mind Clash Deluxe Extras will. Moving on, we have Roll Camera, Reprint, and Expansion. We're really heavily into the new stuff here. Voidfall Fractal is where we moved from last week's updates to all the new stuff, and Roll Camera, Reprint, and Expansion is going to be the follow-up to, what's his name? His name is Malachi. Malachi is going to be coming back to, well, Kickstarter with, he's had 3 games. He had like Stinky Feet or something like that, which is a card game that was really popular, not my genre. Then we had Roll Camera, which is a game I covered on Kickstarter last year, which has started delivering and is getting, well, it's getting decent ratings so far. And then we have Roll Camera, B-Movie, and Expansion. And the premise of the game, the premise of the general Roll Camera universe, is going to be a cooperative dice rolling and placement game where you're trying to make a movie, and the goal of what you're trying to do is you're trying to make a movie that's either good enough that you win or so bad that it's good. Anywhere in the middle, and you do not want to aim for mediocrity. You want to excel either in how good or how bad you are. And every round you're going to be taking dice and placing them in different zones and basically just trying to figure out, which scenes you're going to be shooting, which various aspects you're going to be adding to your movie. There's different, like, these traits, I can't remember what they're called, but you're trying to, like, get these little cards in the corner of what you're trying to go for there. You're going to have different cards, and the idea cards are going to be the core of the game for me. The idea cards are the fact that every round you're going to have challenges that are happening on set. These cards up at the top of the screen over here, where those challenges are going to be things like, all actors on strike, or, directors refusing to do anything except for shoot in a certain type of film. And then you have these idea cards that you're going to be playing with the other players. You're going to be playing down different idea cards and selecting one that give you some sort of solution. Everyone's going to be wearing fake mustaches, or you're going to bring in a third-party director to kind of direct the movie coming off his last, latest hit. You're dealing with kind of solutions and or chaos, all designed to be a game that is challenging in what's doing while being fun and creative in the approach it takes. And it is fun and creative. The challenges, the bad things that are happening, as well as the good things that are happening, all have a certain character to them that really does shine through. This is a game I've played with Quacklope over on his channel. You can watch the playthrough. That's with the B-Movie expansion. The B-Movie expansion adds a bunch of more things to the game. It adds, where are we over here? Where is the stuff that it adds? It adds, nope, not there. You're trying to get it under the budget. B-Movie, your script now has genre requirements. You can have genres you're trying to get your scripts in, which is going to give you different tokens. There's going to be new ideas, action rolls, and problems. There's going to be new cards, the equipment cards that help the job. And this part we did not do at all. We absolutely should have. But those genre tokens that you get make for great additions to your storyboard. This is not a gameplay aspect at all. But during the course of the game, you can build out a storyboard as you complete the scenes, and then walk through and talk through your storyboard. Not as much my thing, but if you like that little bit of role playing at the end of your game, then that's great over there. And then you have unique characters giving you different challenges or ways to solve the problem. Overall, this is a fun experience. I really enjoyed it more than I thought I would. This was not a game that was really on my radar as much as I personally interested. I like dice placement, but the theme didn't pull me in. But I like how crazy and ridiculous the theme actually, well, is or was. The price points for this game are going to be $30 for just the B-movie expansion and $50 for the base game. And when I covered this game last time, I basically said it's, in that may slightly hold its value, but not really kind of category. Close, but, no cigar as far as retail versus Kickstarter. And I'm half right on that one. So far, retail availability is practically non-existent, which means waiting for retail is not really a question on the table. As far as the secondhand market in this one, Roll Camera, the original Roll Camera game that you paid $50 for, and kudos to Malachi for keeping that price at $50, but that $50 price point, it's selling on the secondhand market for around $40 or so people are taking a small hit on it, but not a large one. I imagine it's going to hold true for the base game and expansion here. If you want the game, I imagine this is a game that if you sell it down the road, you will take, again, roughly that $10 hit on the base game, and then possibly $10 hit on the expansion as well. $30 on the expansion, the content and price point of what you get for the base game versus the content and price point of what you get for the expansion is less so, and that might carry over to the secondhand market and how it's perceived as a game to pick up as well. But overall, if you like this one, if you like the genre, I can highly recommend this game. I really enjoyed my play of it, and that's going to be Roll Camera and B-Movie reprint and expansion. Moving on, we have Don't Go In There. This is a game that was not on my radar or any of my lists at all, although not every game is on my lists. But Don't Go In There is going to be from what's it called? Road to Infamy. This is going to be the company that brought you Canvas. Those two gigantic tons and tons and tons of backers campaigns about the very accessible card game where you basically try to structure, different scenarios, or not scenarios, different goals while you build out a perfect canvas with 3 cards that have acrylic overlays. Either way, that's going to be Canvas, really solid game, and this is going to be Don't Go In There from the same creators. Now, I highly recommend, if you are in any way interested in this game, this is going to be a push your luck game where you're trying to get different cards and you can choose how much to risk, how close you want to be to being haunted. You basically choose how much risk you want to take, but the more risk you undertake on yourself, the better access you have to cards, and that's important because the goal of the game is to be as least cursed as possible, and getting the right cards can help with that. So you're going to simultaneously become more cursed as you, pay for these cards, but again, become less cursed if you get the right card. So a little bit of push your luck, a little bit of not really bidding because you push your luck before you know the result. But either way, that's going to be the core mechanism of the game. I highly recommend watching. There's a little video somewhere here. Somewhere on the page, there's a 2-minute long video, which you can absolutely watch on double speed. So you can put it on double speed on YouTube and spend 1 minute and 15 seconds of your life watching the video, and you'll get a good feel as to whether it's a game for you. Again, a little bit of push your luck in a goal and an attempt to try to get the right combinations of cards. For myself, I am interested and intrigued based on watching the video, although I think the big takeaway for me is going to be that those cards on the table, the different cards you acquire, the different cards you get, and how interesting they are, how important it is to get one card versus another. That's going to be the core focus or net result of how much I would enjoy a game like this. The idea of bidding and pushing your luck, of saying I'm gonna potentially take all 5 dice, not knowing what those dice will be and how punishing it will be. So you're kind of bidding, but without knowing the consequences of what you're bidding just yet. But that combination combined with, figuring out which cards are important, which cards you want to add, which selection of cards you want, that's going to be the big question on the table for me. Price point wise is $25 for the retail edition of the game and $35 for the limited edition, which is over, let me see what the limited edition. The limited edition is giving you more cards basically. So we have the retail edition over here, and then the limited edition, which gives you 32 extra limited edition curse cards, plus all unlocked stretch goals for the game. On this one overall, I would say the price point similar to Canvas, and this is one where I'm a little bit gun shy on this because I always lean a little bit away from games like this holding their value, but I was totally wrong on Canvas. Canvas was a game that absolutely held its value just fine, and that may well hold true for it. The price point of $35 is not bad at all. The question is compared to the components you're getting. So you're getting these extra limited over there, and $25 is just a great price point. I mean, even nowadays, $25 for what you're getting in terms of this box, it seems to be a pretty decent price. The $35 gives you a little more for the exclusives. I'm not confident it holds its value. I'm not, even with Canvas and everything. I'm not saying it won't. I'm just still not confident. This is not seeing the same pickup and adoption as Canvas did, because I think it is a slightly harder selling point as far as the theme, as far as pulling people in. Canvas was always a beautiful game. The thing I wasn't sure is who the target market was, versus this game, This game in general is going to have a slightly harder time finding that market. Keep in mind, it's doing just fine with, what is it, 2,000 backers, so it's not like it's struggling at all, but I think that's mostly Road to Infamy. I think if any other creator had put out this game, if a new creator had come out and put out this game out, I think you'd have 120 backers right now. I don't think you'd have 2,000. I think Road to Infamy's record, I think their track record, how well they've done, I think that has incentivized people to, well, back the game, and that has me paying attention as well. Any other company I probably wouldn't. The gameplay does look appealing, so overall I'm putting this in the I'm not confident it well might hold its value, but if you do go for it, I would go for the limited edition, $10 more, but gives you more content, and like I said already, the cards are going to be the biggest question on the table as to how important they are or are not in figuring out what works for you. Moving on, we have Federation the board game. Federation the board game. This is going to be 367 backers, $28,000. This is going to be primarily a worker placement game. This is going to be from Explore 8. They have the Specialist as well as some other games on Kickstarter, and this is going to be an expensive experience. This is going to be a worker placement one where you have the whole concept of the game is like this double-sided worker placement where you're simultaneously placing workers for their abilities on one side, for their votes on another, while you try to swing the votes in the ways that'll favor you. So a little bit of worker placement, a little bit of politics and manipulation, not like politics the kind we don't like, but politics the kind that's fun in board games. And moving on, and that's going to be the core mechanic of this worker placement engine. The price point is going to be the hard one over here. The price point is coming in at $87 for the deluxe edition of this game, and it's not clear what you're getting comparatively speaking for the deluxe edition. Now, games in general are getting more expensive. We do know that. That's not a question at all. Games in general on Kickstarter are getting expensive to the point that last week on Beast I was like, $59 almost seems too cheap, when 3 weeks earlier it wouldn't, well, maybe 4 weeks earlier, 5 weeks earlier, that wouldn't have been. So in general we are seeing increased price points, but it still seems like a lot of money for this game compared to what you're getting, at least based on going through the contents. There's some dual layered stuff, but not enough, in my opinion, to have that price point in a normal time. Although we're not in a normal time, which is always in the weird space we are. The Specialist was also an expensive game, to be fair. The Specialist, their last Kickstarter, was expensive. It does seem like what's the name of the company again? Explore 8. Is it Explore 8? It's going to be... Explore It. Yeah, Explore It over here. Their games in general have not been cheap. The Specialist is one that, if you look at what it costs on Kickstarter compared to what it's selling at retail, compared to what it's selling in the secondhand market, people are losing a little bit there. And this, I think, will hold true as well for Federation. I think it's a very expensive game for a mechanic that, while unique, those dual use worker placement, I think it's an interesting approach to the genre, and I'm happy they're doing, well, something fairly new, or if it's not new, I haven't seen it done before. But overall, I'm happy the game exists, happy it's on Kickstarter, art by Miguel Coimbra, but overall, I think this is one that's going to be harder to maintain its value on. If you're interested in the game for the sake of the game, it might be the best price point to get it at, because there's going to be very low options or availability, both at retail and the secondhand market, as far as getting your hands on Federation the board game. And then lastly, we have Mythwind. Shorter week this week, relatively speaking. Last week we have Mythwind. Mythwind is going to be 7,200 backers, $670,000 raised. This game is knocking it out of the park so far. Solid job all around in terms of, well, what's it called? In terms of Brendan McCaskill from Games. Is, I think, out of something. It's like Out of Your Mind, or out of, I can't remember what stands for, but either way, their last Kickstarter was Stars of Icarios. That one's going to be hopefully delivering early 2022. I know they've had delays, the whole world has had delays, but Mythwind's going to be their newest attempt at, basically, well, newest Kickstarter, although attempt is true because they are doing something new here. Mythwind is taking an approach to board games that we haven't seen in the board game space, we've only seen in the video game space, which is the idea of a persistent world that you just build and build and build. Is there a theoretical endpoint? There likely will be a point where you run out of buildings, you run out of events, but even then, in theory, you can keep playing, although I imagine people won't. But it's a game that theoretically has no end, but almost certainly has an end to the content, just the nature of the way things are. But then past that, it's going to have a question of what's the win or loss condition, because it doesn't have one. Mythwind is not a game where you win or you lose. It's a game where you build. It's a game where you keep playing so that you can continue building, so you can continue unlocking new buildings, so that your characters can get better at what they do. This is an approach that we've seen in games like, in video games, not board games, in games like Stardew Valley, in games like Animal Crossing, in any Sims game, in any Roller Coaster Tycoon, Zoo Tycoon game. It's giving you that aspect of just building for the sake of building. It does throw in some challenges, so there are going to be some challenges where across a season you have to do X, Y, and Z, or else you get a small hit or something happens, but those are going to be small, not really overly impactful things. Think of Roller Coaster Tycoon, where you go into a scenario and you do have to kind of, like, you know, get 600 guests by the end of whatever, but at the end of the day, that's not why you're playing. playing. There are people who might dive back in to achieve that objective, but that's not the core reason you're playing the game. You're playing Roller Coaster Tycoon so you can keep building roller coasters. And so Mythwind's taking that approach. It's giving you asymmetrical characters, asymmetrical cooperative experiences. And this is a game that I did have a chance to play it. I did have a chance to review the game. You can check out my review on the channel. But it's one where and I've only dived into the crafter and the farmer so far. Those are only characters we had. But it's one where the characters are asymmetric, but they're going to be on the lighter side, at least from what I've seen so far. I very much called it a first impressions because I know so many things about the game are still changing. So many things are still being developed. The depth to the character that the characters go to, the story, the way it branches out based on your decisions, the amount of content there is. We only had a short taste of the experience. So depending on how complex those characters get, at least right now so far, they fall more in the Merchant's Cove genre of being asymmetric, being different, but not being excessively different, not being excessively challenging. They have an input and an output, and that moves on. The input is the actions you take, the output is the money you generate, so that you can put it towards the resources the town will need, so you can put it towards the buildings you want to build, so that your characters can get better, so that you can continue the cycle of building out the town of... Is it called Mythwind? I don't know if the town's called Mythwind. Whatever the town is. And then there's also going to be the Merchant and the Woodsman, although I believe they're changing the Woodsman to the Ranger. I believe they said they're changing that. Those are going to be two other character experiences, again, giving you those asymmetric aspect to the game. That's going to be the core aspect of Mythwind. The core gameplay of Mythwind. It's a game where you build so that you can continue building, so you can unlock more stuff, so you can get better. The primary goal of the game is going to be going through all the content, going through all the story and all the buildings, and having a fully built out town to whatever degree or shape you can in this game. Now, the pledge levels and the price point in this game is going to be let's move up a slot. We have $85 for the core box, and we have $117 for the core box plus Horizons expansion, and $141 for the core box plus Horizon plus the magical miniatures. And this is an important point. So, two important points, especially if you watched any of the videos about this game. The first important point is miniatures will not come pre-painted. When you've seen, well, let's go through all the important points. Miniatures won't come pre-painted in the game. That's number one. Number two is going to be the miniature sizing is very different than what you've seen in the videos. Now, I mentioned this in my video, but I didn't know how different it would be. The miniatures we have in the game that I had was giant, chunky miniatures. And these ones over here are going to be 28mm miniatures. They're not going to be near the same size as what you saw in the video. So factor in the sizings, the 63mm, 28mm, factor in those when you look at the videos that have the miniatures and the miniatures you're getting. So I just don't want you to be oversold on giant chunky miniatures versus, well, smaller miniatures that are more typical game size. And then additionally, the sprites that you get in the game, they're not in the core box. So you can scroll through the components you're seeing here. They're showing you everything. And there is a lot, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, a lot or not, there is not going to be those sprites unless you buy the extra pack. So if we scroll down over here, you can see over here the various, we're going to have the Expanded Horizons expansion giving you another character, which is going to be slowly built out with the backers over the course of the campaign. We have the general components you're going to be having, more story, more everything. And then we have the magical miniatures, the magical sprites, which are over there. These are going to be all the sprites over here. Again, they do not come pre-painted. Again, they're still 28mm base over there. And they're over here, $25 for the magical miniatures, which currently has 5, although if or when they hit $1 million, and I think it is when they hit, not if, there's going to be a 6th magical sprite added to the game. So they have a lot there, but again, if you back the core box of Mythwind and you're like, where are my magical sprites? They're not in there. Just understand that the game has been heavily marketed with those sprites, with those miniatures, showing them left, right, and center, but it's an optional buy. It is not, or one of the higher pledge levels, it's not something you just get in the core experience. Now, granted, they have no gameplay relevance, at least not yet, so it's not something you need, but if something you wanted, they're not in that over there. Then we have metal coins as well for $25. We have the journal for $20, and the price points are both US and Canadian over there. We have the art book, we have the neoprene mat, all of that for Mythwind. Now, stretch goals wise, they actually had a little bit of a oopsie, but then they also course corrected, so congratulations to them for correcting, which is basically they were funding very fast. This game is doing very well so far, and then they basically went from, like, you know, whatever, they jumped straight to like 300 or 400k jumps between stretch goals, and then they kind of tapered off. They kind of jumped to where the funding was at instead of backtracking to the way it worked out. They course corrected, they unlocked a bunch of stuff, they, you know, went with the 75k tiers in between or whatever it was. They're slowly expanding and all that, but they did go back and adjust and change the stretch goals. We're up to 4 building tiles. Next up, we have the Ivory Core cards. Then we're going to have the $1 million. It's going to be the 4 magical miniature box, a 6 sprite miniature, and then 875k for more Ivory Core cards. And then that's going to be everything going on in Mythwind. So a lot to cover over there, which brings us to the, you know, should you back it, should you not, all of that. And overall, I may well have a dedicated video on Mythwind before the end of the campaign. We have 21 days to go. For me, it's just a question of scheduling, trying to fit it in, so I didn't get it right away. So if I do a dedicated one at this point, it'll probably be towards the end. But overall, Mythwind is one that at $7 7,200 backers, $670,000 is an interesting one to judge, primarily because it's a very unique thing in what it's trying to do, a very unique thing that has a lot of people skeptical, and people like myself who play the game, and I need a game that gives me a win and loss condition. I don't love games that just have me kind of building on the side. I need to figure out the reasons to optimize, need to give me a reason to dive in, a reason to play, a reason to jump into that. And so overall, Mythwind in its current form isn't a game for me. I'm very intrigued as to where it goes. I think it may well be a game for me if and how it develops, depending on, well, where the engine continues to go. But overall, that makes it a interesting game, and you have 7,000 people backing the game, jumping on in because the game looks gorgeous, the game looks like it's fascinating, it is different, it stands out just with the very fact that it's different, it stands out as a game worth paying attention to. But there's a lot of people who are also skeptical of saying, no, I also need a reason to play. I need a reason to have the win or the loss. I need that tension. So it falls very much into this middle camp. Now, the price point, that $85 pledge level for what you get, you're getting custom game trays for all the characters, game trays that are designed to set up and hold the game. So you're not just getting the components. The components alone are a decent price point right there, but then you're getting like 5 game trays in addition to everything else just added to your game. You can have the core game tray over here, game trays for each of the characters. That's a lot of plastic being added to your box for a decently reasonable price point. I think Mythwind will hold its value. I'm not 100% confident in it, but I think it will. Because I think that same buzz, the same interest that has 7,000 people currently back in the game, despite that uncertainty about whether it ends up being a new addition and a unique thing to the gameplay world that we see other companies try to replicate, or whether it ends up being not for them, that same buzz and appeal that has 7,200 people paying attention will carry over to the secondhand market as well. It'll carry over to you finding out the game's not for you, and you being like, hey, you know what, Mythwind wasn't what I wanted. It's great, cool, but doesn't have the desire to go forward, and then you put your copy up for sale, and someone who missed the Kickstarter will jump in because there's going to be the same hype and buzz down the road as there is now, possibly even more as things continue to get fleshed out and added, and the stretch goals and all of that. So overall, Mythwind is a game that I do think will hold its value. I'm not 100% confident. It's always tricky when a game does something unique in the space, but I do think it's a pretty safe bet as far as holding its value, which brings me to picks of the week. In general, picks of the week, I always choose from the new campaigns only, not the, well, older campaigns, but all the new stuff only, which means we actually don't have that many new campaigns, all things considered. We have Fractal, we have Roll Camera, we have Don't Go In There, we have Federation, the board game, and Mythwind. As far as the value pick of the week, I am going to pick Mythwind. I generally do 2 picks of the week every single week, one that I think is the most likely to hold its value after you get it, and one that I think is my personal interest level. For Mythwind's going to be my value pick of the week. It's a tough one over here, but I do think it will hold its value. I do think people are interested in the game, and I think that will carry over. I think there are a lot of people who are intrigued by the idea of a world that will continue just building for the sake of building, of getting better at your characters for the sake of getting better at your characters. As far as my personal interest pick of the week, it's going to be Fractal Beyond the Void. Fractal Beyond the Void is a game that looks fun to me. It looks like a game that gives me a 4x experience. It looks like it had the text look fun, like the reasons to dive back into, to go at each other's throats again and again as you try to compete over which technologies. One of the fun things about the game I didn't talk about in this video, I talked about in the full Fractal versus Voidfall video, is the technologies you have. There's going to be 2 copies of each tech, but you can double up. So I can get 2 copies of a tech, getting stronger at that little competitive advantage while denying you both of them, which does make for a very, well, fun little thing. But overall, that's going to be everything. That has been your to back or not to back, and as always, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you have a good one, and I meant to say, and as always, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one. Sometimes I say I hope you have a good one, and I say and then it's weird because I don't have an and after that. I go too fast. So, in about an hour or so, I'm going to be hopping online to play some Resident Evil, the original game. I have the prototype as well. I have this over here. Resident Evil over here. I have that. We'll be covering at some point, but I'll be playing it on TTS first with the designers or with Steamforge Games. Past that, like I said already, October is a brutal month. October is just... next week's not that bad. Next week you can still save some money. Next week we have Forgotten Treasure, we have Perpetuity, we have Paint the Roses, Dandelions and Psychic Pizza Deliveries Go to Ghost Town. Yes, that's a name. We have Taverns and Dragons, Thunder Road Vendetta, Garden Bow, and Bardwood Grove. Decent selection of stuff, but you're still pretty safe. The week after that is where things start heating up. We have Dreamweavers, Steama, Pachamama, Dampierre, Too Many Bones Unbreakable, Senjutsu Battle for Japan, Four Glories, Circadian's Chaos Order, City of the Great Machine, Small Railroad Empires, Lords of Ragnarok, Summoners of the Rainbow, Dice Throne Marvel. No, Dice Throne Marvel's the week after that. So yeah, we got some things, including Too Many Bones Unbreakable and Lords of Ragnarok. Then we have Dice Throne Marvel coming up after that, King Hill, Mega Pulse, Power Plants, Hegemony, Escape from Arkham Asylum, A Giant Miniatures, Batman Game, Rocket Cats, Resident Evil, Weather Machine. It's going to be an expensive month. Just saying. So pick and choose your Kickstarters carefully, because it's going to be an expensive month.